They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings.
AI technology has made another outstanding breakthrough in decoding ancient Sumerian texts and reveals terrifying knowledge about human races. For years, these clay tablets sat in museums, locked in time, too complex, too fragmented, too strange for scholars to fully piece together. But AI, with its ability to process thousands of lines of ancient script in seconds. How did that happen? Stick with me till the very end of this video, because we're going to break down the shocking revelations about humanity's origins and uncover why this information might have been kept hidden for thousands of years. Sumerian tablets reveal creation of humans by gods. The discovery of the ancient Sumerian tablets has opened a window into a world so distant, yet so strangely familiar, that one cannot help but pause and wonder, could this really be how some of humanity's earliest creation stories were imagined? These clay tablets, preserved for thousands of years, do more than just recount myths. They reflect the fears, struggles, and hopes of an ancient people trying to explain the purpose of human life. What makes these findings so remarkable is not just their age, but the picture they paint. A story where human beings were not born out of love or cosmic accident.
A royal archive containing thousands of clay tablets with cuneiform inscriptions,
but deliberately fashioned as laborers to serve higher powers. And isn't that, in itself, a question worth pondering? What does it say about our origins when the very first stories describe us as workers created to lighten someone else's burden? The narrative begins long before humanity existed, in a time when the gods themselves bore the weight of endless toil. These gods, called the Igigi, were said to have been tasked with shaping the earth, maintaining the natural order, and carrying out relentless physical labor. Imagine divine beings, immortal and powerful, yet bending their backs under work so heavy that even they grew weary of it. The tablets tell us that their suffering became unbearable. When the gods, like men, bore the work and suffered the toil of the gods was great. The work was heavy, the distress was much. One can almost hear the exhaustion in those words, a reminder that even beings we think of as invincible had their breaking points. And really, if even the gods could grow tired, is it any surprise that humans complain of hard labor today? The cries of the Igigi reached Nama, the primordial mother goddess of the sea. She, filled with compassion, could not ignore their plight. It is said that she went to her son Enki, the god of wisdom and water, who rested in the depths of the Apsu. At first, Enki did not want to be disturbed, perhaps weary of intervening, but the magnitude of the situation forced his hand. Alongside Anu, the god of gods, they admitted the truth. The burden had grown far too great. And here lies the turning point of the entire tale. Rather than finding another way to share the load, Enki proposed something extraordinary, even unsettling. Why not create a new type of being? Why not form a race that could take the heavy work away from the gods once and for all? Isn't it fascinating to think that humanity's very existence, according to this story, began not with divine affection, but with a kind of cosmic labor dispute? The creation process that followed was far from simple, and in truth, it carried a chilling tone. For the humans to come into being, a god named Gestu was chosen for sacrifice. His blood, rich with divine essence, was mixed with clay from the Abzu, the freshwater depths where Enki dwelled. Out of this mixture of earth and divinity, the first human beings were formed. The text puts it starkly: "You have slaughtered a god together with his personality. I have removed your heavy work. I have imposed your toil on man." Such words strike deeply, don't they? They suggest that humanity was born out of sacrifice, but also that our destiny was predetermined, not for freedom or greatness, but for service. Ninma, also known as Ninhursag, stepped in as the midwife of creation, ensuring that the divine plan took shape. Alongside her were other goddesses: Ninima, Suziana, Ninmada, Ninbarag, Ninmug, and Ninguna, each playing a role in shaping the new beings. With careful hands, they molded humans from clay and divine blood, binding the essence of heaven and earth into fragile bodies. But what purpose did these humans serve? The tablets leave no doubt. The deities fashioned man from clay to cultivate the ground, care for flocks, and perpetuate the worship of the gods. Humanity's first job description was clear: farmers, shepherds, and worshippers. Isn't it remarkable how little that differs from the foundations of early civilization itself? Agriculture, livestock, and devotion. These were the cornerstones of survival then. And according to the Sumerians, they were written into our very design. Even the place of this creation carries symbolic weight. The tablets mention Eden not as the paradise we imagine from later traditions, but simply meaning flat terrain. This land lay between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the cradle of Sumerian civilization. It is fascinating to see how a word first used to describe a landscape would later evolve into a symbol of lost perfection. And when the texts say humans were made in likeness to the gods, it almost hints at the echoes of ideas that would later spread across other cultures. But just when you think it can't get any more mind-bending, the story takes a darker, more unsettling turn. Because what if those gods weren't just shaping humanity in their image, but actually altering our very genetics for their own purposes? Yes, you heard that right. The Sumerian texts hint at something far more shocking. And if you stay with me till the end, you'll see how the Anunnaki's role in modifying human DNA wasn't about kindness or creation at all. Anunnaki alter human genetics for labor. The newly translated Sumerian texts tell a story that feels both fascinating and unsettling at the same time, almost as if humanity's earliest days were not quite as natural as people have always assumed. According to these ancient writings, there was a darker chapter in human development after the first creation.
The messages carved into stone are considered to be the world's first written accounts.
The tablets describe how the Anunnaki, powerful deities in Mesopotamian mythology, were not satisfied with the earliest version of mankind and kept modifying humans to better suit their purposes. One might wonder, if humans were truly made to serve, what did that say about freedom and destiny right from the beginning? The texts suggest that in the earliest days, humans were designed not as independent beings, but as laborers, tools in the hands of gods who wanted relief from their own work. At first, these early humans carried one very strange limitation. They could not reproduce on their own. Every new human had to be created directly through divine intervention. In a way, they were living machines, unable to continue their own species without permission. This dependency made sure that the gods held complete control over their population. And why was this so important to the gods? The records reveal that humans were created with one main purpose: to take on the exhausting tasks that the gods no longer wished to do, such as digging canals, farming, and even mining. These people, though shaped in the image of divine beings, were not considered equals. They were servants, bound by design. Doesn't it raise a haunting question? What does it mean to be human if you were created only for labor? But things began to shift with one particular breakthrough. The texts describe the creation of Adapa, who is portrayed as the first truly independent human. Enki, the god of wisdom, and his consort Ninki decided to modify the existing human design. This time, they granted humans the ability to reproduce and, in doing so, gave them a path to independence. Adapa stood as proof of this success. Known in stories as chief among men, Adapa was no ordinary human. The writings say he was filled with extraordinary wisdom and intelligence by Enki himself, who also went by the name Ea. Adapa was described as someone whose command none could oppose and whose insight shaped the destiny of the land. In many ways, he was the first symbol of what humans could become if they were more than just workers. Adapa's role in daily life also painted a picture of how deeply tied he was to the gods. He served as a priest in Ea's temple at Eridu, offering ritual bread and water, while also performing tasks like fishing in the Persian Gulf. It was during one of these fishing journeys that Adapa encountered Anu, the sky god. And this meeting changed everything. Anu offered him a chance at immortality, but Adapa, guided by Enki's warning, refused it. That single choice sealed humanity's fate as mortal beings. The irony is almost painful, isn't it? The one man who was wise enough to change the destiny of humanity unknowingly denied mankind eternal life because he trusted his Creator's words. Was this a test, or was it a manipulation meant to keep humans limited forever? These genetic changes and Adapa's creation sparked fierce conflict among the gods themselves. Enki believed in giving humans autonomy and wisdom. He seemed to want humans to grow, to live beyond servitude. But his brother Enlil saw things differently. To him, humans were only tools, and their freedom threatened the order he wished to keep. Their disagreement over humanity's place became one of the central struggles of these myths. Enki stood on the side of progress and compassion, while Enlil clung tightly to control and obedience. Isn't it striking how this mirrors the same struggles humans face in their societies even today? The battle between freedom and authority, between knowledge and control. The disagreement between the two brothers grew so fierce that it escalated into what the texts describe as a kind of civil war in the heavens. Enlil ultimately came out on top, pushing Enki aside and securing his authority over both gods and humans. Yet, Enki did not stop trying to protect humanity, working in secret to pass on knowledge and defend them from Enlil's harsh control. This divine conflict reached a terrifying climax when Enlil, fed up with human growth and Enki's interference, decided to wipe out mankind with a great flood. But here again, Enki intervened. He secretly warned one chosen human, known in later traditions as Noah, giving him the instructions needed to survive the flood and preserve life. Without that defiance, humanity itself might not exist today. These texts, now translated with the help of modern AI, give a very different picture of human origins than the one people are used to. Instead of natural evolution or a simple divine gift of life, they describe humanity as a carefully engineered creation, built to serve, controlled through design, and caught in the middle of power struggles between higher beings. They raise questions that shake the very core of human identity. Were humans meant to be free from the start, or were they only ever supposed to obey? Were we created in the image of gods, or simply manufactured to do their bidding? And if our earliest ancestors were shaped and reshaped by divine hands, how much of our destiny is really our own? Ancient texts describe advanced technology. The newly translated Sumerian texts have opened up a flood of discussions, not just among historians, but also among ordinary people who cannot help but wonder, how much did the ancients really know? When people think of the Sumerians, they often imagine myths of gods, creation stories, and early forms of writing on clay tablets. But beyond those myths, these new translations reveal something far more startling: references to advanced technological knowledge that should have been completely out of reach for a civilization that existed thousands of years ago. How is it possible, one might ask, for a people so ancient to have even hinted at things like electricity, metallurgy, flying machines, or even weapons that sound eerily close to nuclear energy? The very idea seems impossible, and yet, here it is, etched into tablets that were buried for millennia. For instance, the texts contain references to electricity.
People that look like us started to come between their planet and Earth.
Now, how could people from that era have any idea about something we often consider to be the hallmark of the modern world? While most mainstream archaeologists insist the so-called Baghdad Battery was probably used for more ordinary purposes, perhaps for storing sacred objects, magical charms, or even just as a container, other researchers are not so sure. Some argue that the ancients may have actually stumbled upon a crude way of harnessing electricity. After all, the Sumerians lived under skies that often flashed with lightning, and they must have experienced static electricity. Could it be that their curiosity pushed them to experiment with such natural phenomena? The texts make it clear they understood lightning not just as divine punishment, but also as a force of nature they could observe and perhaps even replicate. Isn't it fascinating to imagine them standing under stormy skies, wondering how to capture that spark of the heavens? Equally striking is their knowledge of metallurgy. The tablets show that the Sumerians had an advanced understanding of copper alloys, especially arsenic copper and tin bronze. Such knowledge is not trivial. It allowed them to create tools, weapons, and implements far stronger and more reliable than simple copper. With these, they were able to build, farm, and defend their society. Think about it for a moment. How many steps did it take for them to discover that adding certain elements to copper changed its strength and durability? It was not mere chance. It suggests careful observation, trial, and a system of knowledge that resembles science itself. Does this not make us question whether ancient civilizations were far more advanced in their thinking than we give them credit for? But perhaps the most eyebrow-raising revelations lie in their references to flying machines. The texts mention vehicles or crafts that resemble what later Indian texts call vimanas. These were not just poetic metaphors. The tablets seem to draw a clear line between beings who could fly naturally, like birds or gods, and mechanical devices that were constructed to fly. The descriptions grow even more astonishing. Machines with wings built from light wood, powered by engines that supposedly used mercury and iron heating elements, joints that were welded tightly to contain this strange liquid, and an operation so powerful that it roared like thunder. It is almost unbelievable, isn't it? How could people thousands of years ago imagine something so close to the engines of modern aviation? Was it just imagination, or could it have been inspired by something they had actually seen? The very question lingers, pulling the reader deeper into curiosity. Equally captivating are the passages about medicine. The Sumerians were not merely describing herbs or simple remedies. Some of their tablets mention procedures and terms that point to a more technical grasp of human anatomy. Did they really know about surgeries and bodily functions in ways we cannot fully understand today? Could they have inherited knowledge from an even earlier civilization, now lost to time? One cannot help but wonder what it would mean if their medical insights were not only metaphorical, but practical. After all, what would a people gain from inventing complex medical details if they had no use for them? And then comes the most disturbing part of these texts, the descriptions of weapons that sound very much like nuclear devices. Certain passages talk about weapons that shone with a blinding light, exploded with catastrophic force, and left entire regions uninhabitable for a very long time. Modern researchers who lean toward alternative theories point to the unusually high levels of radioactivity found in places like the Dead Sea as possible evidence. For them, this cannot simply be brushed off as coincidence. Yet mainstream scholars dismiss such interpretations. They remind us that there are no traces of an industrial society from that period, no ruins of massive factories, no scattered remains of iron or steel. If nuclear energy had once been unleashed, would we not see the fingerprints of such destruction everywhere? It is a powerful counter-argument, and yet the possibility, however slim, remains a haunting thought. In the end, the question is not easily answered. Were the Sumerians recording actual advanced technologies that somehow existed long before our time, or were they simply writing myths and metaphors that we, in our modern lens, have mistaken for technical detail? Could it be that their imagination was so vivid that they created visions of flying machines, medical surgeries, and devastating weapons without ever having seen them? Or is there something buried deeper in human history, something we have not yet uncovered, that could explain how they came to know these things? These are the debates that continue to stir among scholars and curious minds alike. And if you think that's fascinating, wait until you hear what comes next, because their writings don't stop at strange technologies or odd symbols. No, they go even further, and some say they contain chilling warnings of events so massive they could shake our very existence. So don't blink, don't scroll, and don't look away, because what the Sumerians claimed about the future is something you'll want to hear till the very last word. Sumerian writings warn of cosmic catastrophes. The translated Sumerian tablets, though thousands of years old, seem to speak with a voice that still echoes into today's world. Among their most troubling revelations are warnings about cosmic catastrophes linked to celestial bodies and their interactions with Earth. It is fascinating, isn't it, how an ancient civilization, without the telescopes, satellites, or mathematical models that modern science relies on, managed to describe events with such detail that even astronomers of our time raise their eyebrows. These writings do not sound like random myths scribbled on clay. Instead, they read like careful records, written by a people who clearly observed the skies with a seriousness that borders on obsession. Could it be that they knew more than we give them credit for? One of the most debated parts of these texts is the mention of a celestial body known as Nibiru. The tablets describe it as having an orbit of about 3,600 years around our sun, a path so long and so elliptical that it could disappear from sight for millennia before returning. Those who study these writings argue that Nibiru was considered the 12th member of our solar system, if one counts not just the planets, but also the sun and moon. The story goes that Nibiru once collided with a planet called Tiamat, which supposedly existed between Mars and Jupiter. From that cosmic collision, they claimed, came the Earth, the asteroid belt, and even the moon. Such a story may sound like pure myth to some, but does it not make one wonder? How could people who lived so long ago create such a detailed narrative about planetary destruction unless it was rooted in some form of memory or observation? The scholar Zecharia Sitchin, though often labeled as controversial, devoted his life to these tablets and boldly suggested that Nibiru's orbit continues to this day.
Zecharia Sitchin devoted his life to proving the link between human beings and the Nephilim, giants mentioned in the book of Genesis.
According to him, its last close passage was around 3,600 years ago, which would suggest it is due to return soon. Yet mainstream astronomers counter this claim, pointing out that such an orbit would be unstable. In their view, a planet on such a path would either be drawn into a more circular orbit by gravity or flung out into space altogether. But then again, if we think about it, how many times has modern science changed its mind on matters once thought impossible? Flood narratives are perhaps the most famous of all. The Eridu Genesis tells of Enlil, the master of the universe, who became so annoyed by the noise of humans that he decided to wipe them out with a great flood. Similar stories appear in the Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh, echoing through different cultures and times. Archaeological digs suggest these tales may not just be symbolic, but tied to real floods in places like Shuruppak around 2900 BCE. Could these legends, passed down and retold, be humanity's way of remembering and warning future generations of catastrophic events? What makes the Sumerians even more impressive is the way they meticulously studied the sky. For over 7 centuries, Babylonian scholars observed, tracked, and recorded celestial movements. Some historians even call it the longest-running scientific project in human history. They mapped patterns, predicted eclipses, and wove their knowledge into religion, politics, and daily life. To them, the heavens were not just a backdrop of stars, but a living clock, a warning system, and a book of prophecies all in one. Imagine living in a world where every eclipse was not just a natural event, but a message from the cosmos itself. Wouldn't that change the way one looked at the sky each night? In 7th century BCE Assyria, for instance, lunar eclipses were viewed as signs of impending doom. Such was the weight given to these celestial events that they even influenced royal matters. During an eclipse, kings would sometimes step aside temporarily, allowing a substitute king to take the throne to absorb whatever misfortune the heavens had in store. This ritual, strange as it may sound today, reveals how deeply entwined their understanding of the cosmos was with their survival and governance. Some modern researchers suggest that within these tablets lies more than history. There may also be predictions. The texts, they argue, point toward rare celestial alignments, including one involving Earth, the Sun, and even the center of the Milky Way. Whether these alignments truly have the power to affect life on Earth remains a matter of debate. But when one thinks about the accuracy with which the Sumerians tracked the heavens, is it not worth at least a pause? Could it be that they foresaw patterns that we are only beginning to understand with today's technology? Scholars debate literal versus mythological interpretations. The interpretation of the newly translated Sumerian texts has stirred up a storm in academic circles, giving rise to what many now call the Sumerian problem. From the very moment the rediscovery of Sumerian civilization took shape, the arguments began almost instantly, and they have only grown louder over the years. On one side, there are the traditional scholars, those who view the texts as nothing more than mythology, stories passed down to make sense of the world in a time when science and modern reasoning did not yet exist. They insist that these ancient writings should be treated as symbolic, not literal, pointing out that references to gods creating humanity were likely poetic attempts to explain natural events. Yet, the debates surrounding this have not always been calm or detached. Reports have described how respected scholars went as far as attacking each other openly and personally, showing just how emotionally invested many of them are. After all, isn't it fascinating how something written thousands of years ago still has the power to divide some of the world's brightest minds today? But then comes the other side of the argument, the one that has captured the imagination of many beyond academic walls. Researchers like Zecharia Sitchin offered a very different interpretation of these texts, suggesting that they were not mere myths, but detailed accounts of actual encounters with beings from beyond Earth.
He took a very scholarly approach, and my uncle was like, here's this research, here's this evidence.
Sitchin argued that the Anunnaki, figures often depicted as gods in Sumerian writings, were in fact advanced extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth long ago.
Sitchin's research identifies them as ancient aliens known as the Anunnaki.
According to his claims, they genetically engineered early humans by combining their own DNA with that of Homo erectus, ultimately creating a kind of slave species meant to serve them, primarily in mining gold. Now, whether one accepts this theory or not, it cannot be denied that the idea is as thrilling as it is controversial. Isn't it tempting, after all, to wonder if humanity's origins hold secrets far stranger than we've been taught? Of course, critics are quick to respond that Sitchin's interpretations were far from accurate. Many historians argue that he deliberately misrepresented or mistranslated Sumerian texts to fit his theories. In fact, mainstream experts emphasize again and again that his work has been universally rejected in serious academic study. And this leaves us with a question. Should one lean toward the exciting possibility of hidden truths, or should one remain firmly grounded in what evidence can be verified? When it comes to evidence, genetics and archaeology have played their roles in this great debate. Genetic studies have shown that the closest living population to the ancient Sumerians are the marsh Arabs of southern Iraq, people who still live today in the wetlands near where Sumer once thrived. This fact is often highlighted to show the direct continuity of human history in the region, connecting the distant past with the present. Archaeologists, on the other hand, remain deeply skeptical of any extraterrestrial connection. They argue that there is simply no physical evidence, no artifacts, no advanced technologies, nothing buried in the soil that even remotely suggests alien involvement. As skeptics like to point out, the oldest findings from archaeological digs in Mesopotamia trace back no earlier than around 7000 BC, and everything unearthed so far falls within the expected trajectory of human development, not intervention by beings from the stars. But then, doesn't the absence of evidence sometimes raise more questions than it answers? Could it be that such proof, if it ever existed, has simply been lost to time? Or is it more likely that humans, driven by curiosity, are simply weaving extraordinary tales into the gaps of history? The tension between these two viewpoints, myth versus extraterrestrial history, has turned the Sumerian problem into more than just an academic discussion. It has become a cultural phenomenon, sparking endless debates among scholars, enthusiasts, skeptics, and dreamers alike. What makes it so captivating is not only the mystery of the texts themselves, but also the way they force people to confront deeper questions about humanity's origins. Are we the product of divine imagination, scientific evolution, or something far more extraordinary? At its heart, this debate is about more than old clay tablets. It is about the human need to understand where we came from and why we are here. And isn't it remarkable that after thousands of years, words carved into stone can still ignite the kind of passion that makes us question everything we thought we knew? With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.